Okay, putting this back together. The missing hardware is on that nut that holds the baffle. And my speaker guy confirmed, as many people suggested, this is a Electro Voice SRO 15-inch 8 ohm from the early 80s. So not original to the amp, but should be a very good choice. And I am just putting it back in place. I've got new washers on the screws and new caps nuts, and I'm just tightening them all in a pattern, kind of like you tune a snare. You don't want to put too much pressure on one side at a time. It can deform the frame. A little bit less of a concern with this beast than with some speakers. This thing's got a massive frame and massive padding, but it's a good practice just to kind of get them finger tight, work around, no real force on any one of them until you get them all finger tight, and then I'll use my full wrist to get them just past finger tight. This one back here I cannot see. All right, so that one's tight. Give it a full wrist. Still not applying as much torque as I could, but I know it's tighter than my fingers can do by themselves, and it will not vibrate loose, which is a very important thing with a speaker of this weight. Dave showed me the trick to getting these really tight, and now they are. And now I'm going to bring the wires, the speaker wires, to them, and I'm going to be tinning them after I strip them back a little bit. This is the positive. I stripped that one back to remind myself which is positive. And it's a little bit tight in here. I think I'm one off from where these originally were. Yeah, this was originally here, so this would have been closer. Okay, I'm gonna redo that. So let me pause this and get to that spot. All right, that's better. Everything will reach. Remember, kids, being a professional isn't about getting everything perfect the first time. It's about doing it a second time if necessary. Boy, that sounds smug. But, you know, seriously, just avoiding the temptation to think no one will notice. That'll be close enough. It'll work okay. Yeah, do things right. So here, I've got this one already tinned. This one, I twisted the exposed length together and tinned the end, then I bent it double on itself. That'll just give me a little bit more surface area for the teeth of these things to grab. A little more contact area. This is not the wire that I would normally use for a speaker connection, but it's what Ampeg used in 1960. And it's a pain in the butt to undo from these basically tube socket connections. In this case, it's a tube-based kind of connection. Not only is it a little bit difficult to do, but I'm not sure that could actually fit a 16 or even 18 gauge wire in that pin. So it's worked for 62 years. It'll probably work again. So here's my positive, and here's my negative. So get it fed through. Once I get it fed through, I'm going to give it a right angle bend. Like that. So the other advantage of doing the wire up double is it has more mechanical strength. See, I can't see where the hole is. Have I mentioned I'm supposed to be wearing bifocals? There we go. And again. That way, should this vibrate loose, though it's not likely with the Electro Voice, it will not pull out. If it vibrates loose, it'll tighten itself right back up and the wire won't have time to leave. Make sure I'm not grabbing the jacket there. That's good. And again, same on this one. Both of them are good. All right, so I've got just enough slack. This isn't under tension, but it's not enough to be flopping around. All the hardware holding the cabinet together is good and tight. The speaker has been checked out. The voice coil's fine. The spider's fine. The cone's good. So next, I was just doing stuff and talking, and then I realized that it wasn't actually recording. So the speaker's installed properly. The polarity is correct. It's all the hardware that holds the cab together is good. Now I've got to get this old, yucky, degraded foam gasket out and then replace it. And I don't know whether I'm just going to have to get in here and fight with the razor. I'd like to get the whole thing down, all the old adhesive off the back as well, without gouging up the wood beneath. This works, slow and steady. It's really like peeling off ancient Scotch tape. Anyway, this is going to take a while. Well, the heat gun and a lot of obstinance did the trick. Got some new weather stripping in here that'll make a nice new sealed gasket. $6 for 10 feet versus the $16 plus shipping that Flip Tops wanted for pretty much the same stuff at only 6 feet, which would allow very little room for error. And once the cabinet is up here with the weight of the transformers, it'll really press in all the way. And we'll give a good seal. This won't vibrate against the rest of the chassis, the rest of the cabinet, and all should be well. So let me hear what it sounds like now that the speaker is wired correctly for use with other cabs, and all the hardware has been tightened up. All right, I've got it hooked up on top of my cabinet, and my cabinet is plugged in the running in series, and they have the same polarity now, so there's no weirdness. I've got the mic for right now on the SRO, and I was getting a weird thing where let me just do this without tangling everything up. If I jiggle the cable, damn it, going from the chassis to the cabinet, I was getting weird sounds. Maybe it only happens if there's a sustained note. Well, now it's not happening. That might have been because when I first powered it up, I had the tubes in a different orientation. I swapped V1 and V2, and there's a cathode that goes to that. I was concerned I would have to change that cable out for a new one, and I'll keep an eye on it. I'm still waiting for some new 6SL7s to arrive, but channel 2 still has a little bit of a gronk that may not be the tubes. Let's see if it's still there after the tube swap. That's on channel 2, and that's not tube related. I suspect it's the grid leak resistors. This thing does not match the schematic, by the way. I've got the schematic for this amp, and it's got lots of red corrections based on what's actually in here. The schematic said that channel 1 should have a 1 meg grid leak. Channel 2 should have a 5.6 meg grid leak. Actually, has a 5.6 on channel 1 and a 2.2 meg on channel 2. And high-value carbon composite resistors like that can be great sources of noise. And given the behavior, it may be something like that. There's also the next stage has a 1K cathode that could be problematic. That would be shared. I'll figure it out what it is. It's something. Maybe it's a plate resistor. I'm just thinking when I have the base plugged in, that's going to be in parallel with the 2.2 meg or the 5.6 meg, so it shouldn't matter. It's a very odd circuit compared to later Ampegs and later amps in general. I digress. I'll find out what the source of the gronk on channel 2 is. For right now, let's just listen to channel 1. And I've got the treble and bass flat, which on the Portaflex with its back Sandal tone stack makes it real mid-rangey. And if you turn the treble and bass both down, you're left with a lot of mids. If you turn them up, the mids begin to scoop a little bit. Just the nature of it. As you turn these up, you get more gain, so you want to back off on the volume to get to about the same place. If I go up a little bit higher. Now this amp is not as bright as some later Portaflexes, B-15s, because it doesn't have the bright and dark inputs. So if you want to raise it up a little bit more than that, kind of stuff, but it's, you know, it is a 1960 amp. It's not going to be a replacement for your modern 5-string slapping rig. Sure sounds better than the dark glass stuff, though. A bit subjective. Let's see if we can get a little bit of growl from it. That's fun. That's not what this thing is designed for. It's not what people think of when they think of a B-15, but you can sure do it. Now, if I go down here with the treble at 4, bass right at 7, and the volume at 7, that's kind of the classic sound. I got a P bass, volume and tone full up. Wait, that's still clacky. Let's roll the tone back. I don't have flats, so. You know, that's the taste. If I do it about 3/4 of the way up, if I pretend I had flats. There's still just a mid-range thing that this speaker does that's not the sound that I want from one of these. It's just not, you know, it's from our point of view, this SRO is from 1983. It's a very nice vintage speaker. From the point of view of this amp, it's a young whippersnapper, and it's designed to do things that the old Alnico CTS that this thing probably originally had never did. You could also have gotten the JBL version for a pretty good upgrade. It's getting a nasal thing. If I bring the treble down on the amp a little bit more. For comparison, Everything the same. We're going to move the mic to the ET65. And the ET65 is a quote-unquote guitar amp. The speakers don't know that they're guitar amps or bass amps. They just try to replicate the signal being fed to them, and they have their own coloration. So everything's set the same. All right, let's swap over to guitar because someone has been asking very nicely to please play a Strat through this. So we will. Let's do it through the 15 for the full effect. Set the tone stack back to noon. You'll hear what I was talking about with that mid-range thing. Let me grab a Strat. All right, neck pickup. Like I said, there's a big mid-range thing when this tone stack is flat. So you really want to bring those up, both treble and bass up, and then bring the volume down a little bit to compensate. Now, while guitar can sound fine through this, the bass response is an octave lower than what you really have on a Strat. So you really need to go a little bit higher on bass to affect that stuff. And the treble stuff is an octave lower than you expect it to be on a Strat. So it's not really doing the sparkles. It's doing this 1K stuff. So that can be a little too punchy for some stuff. And again, that mid-range thing that we're especially fighting with the Strat is more prominent on that 15-inch EV, from what I can hear, than it is through the other speakers. So let's go down to this Veteran 30 with everything set the same. It's certainly not a bad sound at all, but it's a very mid-range focus thing, which can be ideal in a mix for a part. I don't know if it's going to be someone's go-to, you know, basic clean sound. And, you know, that, let's see, let's turn it all the way up. This is with a Strat, mind you, not a Les Paul, but... It's a cool thing. If you have it in a studio, as this one is, when it's done, there can be some guitar secrets that people don't think about with it. But, you know, primarily this will be used for bass because that's where it will shine once I get all the last of the little gremlins out. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of that EV. I find that same mid-range thing to be present in a lot of EV12Ls, which is the later speaker than the SR015. People are like, I want to get that sound, blah, 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 I got with the EV12L. I rarely hear two 12Ls that sound like each other. Some of them sound fantastic, and some of them have this real boxy congestion thing happening, 800 hertz to 1K. This seems to be a kindred spirit to those, but that's subjective.